we were in Studio 2, and the vicar was going to show us all something about the horrendously out-of-tune version of Billy G singing. He got Ben to plug in an FX unit for him and then press play on the remote control, and the new song that Billy G was working on burst from the speakers. Something of a departure for her. It was a cover of Respect by Aretha Franklin. Well, Otis Redding actually, but let's not split hairs. You know the thing. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what it means to me. The vicar pulled down a slider, removing her voice from the mix.
And if we wanted to hear what's coming out of my little wonder beast,
the vicar asked. Ben pointed to a channel further down the console. The vicar proudly slid up the fader to universal disappointment. It brought back the sound of her voice, but it sounded much as before. Not that this appeared to worry the vicar, who was altering the settings on his chosen toy. As he turned the dial, I felt her voice shift off key and go flat. I looked at the vicar, who was smiling. At the beginning of the next line, he span it further, and she hit the most atrociously out-of-tune note. The vicar was enjoying himself.
"You would agree that this is your voice, would you not?" he said to Billy G, "and that the tuning is simply diabolical."
As he said that, he gave the black dial a final spin, and her voice went so deep that it seemed more like a man singing. Billy G let out a huge sigh of relief. She too was now smiling, as at least part of the mystery was revealed to her. In my official capacity as Chief Ignoramus, it fell to me to ask the vicar what he'd been doing.
"Elementary, my dear Watson,"
he replied, smiling in a self-satisfied way.
"Welcome to the wonderful world of weird. My favourite toy, the Eventide Ultra Harmonizer, although any harmonizer would do, even the one that's been reliably wrecking decent records ever since Cher first suggested We Believe. Did it not occur to that pea-sized brain of yours that any toy that will generate fake harmonies or correct an out-of-tune voice can be used to do exactly the opposite, make a perfectly good voice sound out of tune?
So, the singing on the internet is Billy G, but she sung it perfectly in tune, and someone has doctored the recording to make her sound out of tune, I asked, making sure that I understood. It sounded so simple that I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it. And anyone could have doctored the recording that we heard on the internet.
Not anyone. You would need access to the original recording, as you would need to be able to process the voice separately from the music.
Exactly as with the lottery performance, I added, finishing his train of thought.
Voila! So, Exhibit A, the internet tapes, as we shall call them, are simply another way of using the same ammunition that was already used in rigging the lottery performance. Almost certainly done by the same people. One really does have to admire their ingenuity.
Hello? Excuse me, cut in Billy G. I know I'm just a woman and I hate to disturb your private men's club. She smiled at us sarcastically. But I am not just any lady. I am the lady. I think I deserve some explanations. Did you say that whoever did this must have come from this studio?
No, said the vicar, turning to face her. They could have done it in any studio, even at home on a cheap computer. They would, however, have needed access to the original tapes.
Well, I doubt that they have ever left this studio or even this control room. Have they, Ben? She asked. We all looked at the humble Ben. Well, they'll all be in there, he said, pointing to some glass doors behind him. Do you mind going and getting them, Gabriel? I turned and noticed a young guy wearing a garish KMFDM t-shirt who was cleaning up at the side of the studio. I followed him as he disappeared into the small tape room. All the tapes from Billy G's new album are here. It's a 48-track recording, he said. Now, don't ask me why, punksters, but no one has invented a 48-track tape machine. If you want more than 24 tracks of that warm, analogue sound made by conventional tape machines, as Billy G clearly did, it can only be done by locking two 24-track tape machines together. It was the enormous tapes that these machines play. In fact, here's one I heaved in earlier that was stored in large boxes on the metal shelving. As Gabriel lifted down the first of the two reels, I instinctively knew that the box would be empty. He was very slight and was carrying it far too easily. He walked out of the machine room and laid it down on the edge of the console to open it up. Well, that's how it's done, I said, keen to show that I'd spotted it so quickly. Someone's stolen the multi-track tape. Ben opened the box that Gabriel had brought over, and there, inside, was a reel of tape, shielded in white protective guard, just as it should have been. What an anticlimax! So much for my instincts. The vicar looked at me with raised eyebrows, amused at my embarrassment. Gabriel wandered back to get the second tape, which would hold the other 24 tracks of the same song. He carried this to the console in the same way, and once again the box was opened to reveal the tape in its protective wrapping. Billy G jumped up. "Sir, if the tapes are still here and you say that someone had to use those tapes, does it mean that it's been done by someone inside this room?" Billy G asked the vicar. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the reels of tape. He got up and tore the protective wrapping off one of them.
"Did no one teach you to store your tapes tail out?" he asked Ben. "You certainly would not get work in a studio with me."
We all looked at the reel. We could see green leader tape. The start of a tape is always green and the end is always red. It's a convention within studios that tapes are always stored tail out with the red end showing, well, like this one here. Suffice to say, the vicar is a stickler for such things. Ben looked confused. "I always store my tapes tail out, never like this," he said, and as if in his own defence, he pulled the protective wrapping off the second reel of tape. This one was indeed stored correctly.
"Interesting," said the vicar. "One stored one way and one the other. In that case, I would put a large wager on the fact that this,"
he picked up the reel that had offended him by being wrongly stored,
"contains the vocals."
He turned over the box to read the track list. He was, of course, quite right. When's he ever wrong?
"My deductions would seem a trifle more accurate than yours, my dear punk."
He sat triumphantly back in his chair as if waiting for applause. Ben further pampered to his already inflated ego by asking how he knew.
"Simple,"
he replied, slipping into Sherlock Holmes mode.
"Someone has been in here and played that tape in order to make a copy of the vocals. That someone either did not know or did not have time to store the tape properly afterwards. All that they would then need would be a copy of a dub mix." A dub mix, punksters, is a version of the track which does not contain the lead vocals. Ready-made karaoke. The vicar looked at Ben. "You did make one, I assume."
"Well, yeah, of course," Ben said. "We always do, in case Billy G wants to sing live over the recorded backing."
"It would have been a fuck sight better if Freemore had let me use it on the bloody lottery instead of being hung out to dry," commented Billy G caustically.
"Then the lovely lady would still be a sex goddess, not an ex-goddess." A phrase I suspect she'd used before. "Well, the dat will be in here," said Ben, ducking away from Billy G's carping, and he opened a drawer with all the other mixes from the current album. He ran his finger down a neat row of tapes. "I can't see it, but it must be here somewhere. I remember doing the mix." He pulled out a large A4 pad, a detailed inventory of all the recordings made for the album. "Here we are, it's dat number 14. He looked back at the box of tapes, but between number 13 and number 15, there was an ominous gap.
"It would appear that dat number 14 has mysteriously disappeared."
The vicar raised his eyebrows in mock surprise.
"I think that proves my version of events."
That boy's got
"I'm sorry to disturb you, Billy," she said. "This internet thing is getting bigger and bigger. Apparently, Radio 1 Newsbeat have just announced it on air and given the fans the URL to go to.
Trust bloody Radio 1. Siobhan, do you remember her from Real World? Had turned up at our band party and bewitched me with her underhand use of a loaded, gyrating arse. How is a man meant to cope? 1 minute she won't talk to me, the next minute she's sidling up to me backwards and massaging my ever-attentive groin with her delightful little patootie.